My name is Nora Bellamy. I was 35, 9 weeks pregnant, and standing under white string lights on the rooftop of the Vesper Grand Hotel when my mother-in-law decided my baby was a scam. I had carried the ultrasound photo in the zip pocket of my purse all evening, a small grey square with my name, the date, and a heartbeat printed across the bottom. Time equals, quote, zero point 0.6 seconds, quote, slash greater than I thought I was bringing the Ashford family good news. Claire Ashford looked at my husband, then at me, and said in front of 32 guests, "There is no baby. There is only an invoice with a pretty face." 90 seconds later, I was on the lower courtyard stones with a broken left wrist, bruised ribs, and one thought repeating, louder than the music above me: "Find the heartbeat." They would spend the next year trying to call it an accident. They would say I stepped back. They would say I leaned too far. They would say a nurse who kept records for a living had staged her own fall for money. But the EY Vesper Grand had cameras. My best friend had the ultrasound, and Claire had been careless enough to plant the whole thing in writing. Welcome back to Calm Drama Stories, where quiet people learn that the truth does not need to shout when the file is complete. If this story finds you at the right time, stay with me, drop a comment, and subscribe. Time equals, quote, 0.6 seconds, quote, slash greater than. Because the night I thought I had lost my husband, my marriage, and almost my child was the night I started building the folder that would take everything they used to control me and turn it into evidence. Before the terrace, before the cast, before lawyers started using words like felony and protective custody, I was just a labor and delivery nurse who liked quiet mornings. 12 years on the floor had made me precise. I documented times, doses, fetal strips, the exact words a doctor used, and the exact minute a mother asked for help. My co-workers, friends, teased me for charting like a court reporter. But when a room goes bad, memory becomes soft and paper becomes mercy. I owned my own small brick house with a crooked porch on Sycamore Lane. I bought it at 30 with a nurse's salary, overtime, and 10 years of saying no to vacations. I kept my own last name when I married Ethan. Ashford, because Bellamy was the name on my license, my mortgage, and every hard thing I had earned without anyone's trust fund. Ethan was gentle in the beginning. He brought coffee to my night shifts and listened when I came home shaken from a delivery that did not end with a cry. What I did not understand was that Ethan had never lived one day without the Ashford money under him. His mother, Claire, controlled it. His sister, Simone, circled it. His father, Daniel, pretended not to notice how much power sat inside that family trust. I was independent, and to them, independence did not look clean. It looked suspicious. It looked like someone who might not be easy to buy. The Ashford Family Trust was worth about $12.4 million, mostly real estate, development loans, and old hotel stock that Claire liked to describe as responsibility rather than wealth. She was 61, silver hair, soft pearls, and a voice that could turn a compliment into a leash. She called herself the steward of the family. In practice, she decided which adult child had behaved well enough to receive help. Ethan's small construction management firm survived on trust-backed loans. Simone's boutique survived on trust-backed patience. Daniel, Claire's husband, had long ago chosen the easier work of nodding. Before the wedding, Claire's attorney placed a prenuptial agreement in front of me that could have been framed as a warning sign. It said I had no claim to the Ashford Trust, no matter how long I was married, no matter whether we had children, no matter what happened in divorce. I signed it in a navy dress after a 12-hour shift and almost smiled. I had my own house. Time equals, quote, zero point 0.6 seconds, quote, slash greater than I had my own paycheck. I wanted a marriage, not a portfolio. Claire watched me sign like a woman putting a padlock on a gate. The strange part is that she did not know she had also given me the document that would one day clear my name. The paper they built to prove I could never reach their money would become the paper that proved I had never been chasing it. I found out on a Thursday morning between 2 deliveries and a cup of coffee that had gone cold on the nurse's station. 2 lines. I sat in the stuffed bathroom with my hand over my mouth and cried the quiet kind of tears, the kind you wipe away before the next call bell. Ethan cried when I told him. I believed that part was real. He held the test like it was made of glass and whispered, "We are going to be parents." At 9 weeks, the first scan showed a flicker so small I almost didn't trust it until the sound filled the exam room. Fast, stubborn, alive. 162 beats per minute. The technician printed the picture, and I tucked it into the zip pocket of my purse beside my house key. Claire's birthday dinner was that Saturday at the Vesper Grand Hotel, a rooftop reservation with a private bar and a view of the river. Ethan said we should announce it after the toast. He said his mother loved occasions. I wanted to believe a grandchild might soften whatever part of her kept measuring me. The only person who looked worried was Maya Ortiz, my best friend and a charge nurse from my unit. She had watched enough families fold under pressure to distrust polished surfaces. When I invited her as my guest, she said, "I am coming because you are happy, but I am bringing my eyes." I laughed then. I should not have. Maya's eyes would become the first witness I truly had. The Vesper Grand Terrace sat above the city like a glass tray, 11 floors up, with a lower courtyard 1 level beneath the garden edge. The fall from the planter wall to the courtyard was not 11 stories. It was 9 feet and a few inches, enough to break bone, enough to threaten a pregnancy, enough for a rich family to pretend the distance made the shove. Harmless. I noticed the layout because nurses notice hazards. Low stone wall, narrow path, slick pavers near the fountain, metal-framed cameras tucked under the eaves. I filed it away without knowing I was filing evidence. The party was exactly what Claire wanted. Gold napkins, white roses, a harpist, 32 people trained to laugh at the right volume. Simone greeted me by touching my stomach before I had told anyone, and then pretending she had only brushed lint from my dress. Across the bar, Claire and Simone spoke with their heads close together and stopped when Maya and I walked near. Maya's face went still. She leaned toward me and said, "They rehearsed something." I told her no. I told myself wealthy families always seemed rehearsed. Ethan squeezed my hand, nervous and smiling, and kept checking his phone. He had been doing that for days. I thought it was work. Later, I would learn he had been answering his mother in a family thread named Ashford's Circle, a thread that had discussed my pregnancy for 10 days before I announced it. At 9:15, after the cake and before Claire's speech, Ethan tapped his glass. I felt my heart lift before he even opened his mouth. He said, "Nora and I have something beautiful to share. We are having a baby." For 1 second, the terrace warmed. Daniel blinked. An aunt covered her mouth. Maya smiled so hard her eyes shone. Then Claire set her champagne down with a small click, and everything turned. She stood slowly and said, "How convenient." My son is tied to a $12 million trust. And now suddenly, there is a baby. Her voice carried without effort. Time equals, quote, zero point 0.6 seconds, quote, slash greater than. The harpist stopped playing. Ethan said, Mom, please. But it was the voice of a child asking a storm to calm down. Claire looked at me and spoke as if I were not a daughter-in-law, but a document she had found forged. No baby, she said. No miracle. Just a price tag. Wearing a blue dress. Show everyone proof. Nora, prove you are not trying to buy your way into this family. I felt the ultrasound in my purse. I almost reached for it. A colder, smarter part of me said, No. I said, I will not let you turn my child into a courtroom exhibit at your birthday party. Time equals, quote, zero point 0.6 seconds, quote, slash greater than. Claire stepped closer. So there is a child now, she said. Your child. Your leverage. I could feel the low stone planter behind my legs. Maya was moving through the crowd. Ethan was not. That is the part I remember most clearly. My husband stood 6 feet away and waited to see who would win. Claire reached for my purse first. I turned my shoulder away, and the movement made her angrier because, for 1 second, she could not control the object she wanted. Both of her hands came up. Her palms hit my shoulders hard. Not a tap, not a stumble, not the chaos her lawyers would later try to sell. The planter wall caught me behind the knees. The terrace lights tilted. I heard Maya shout my name. Then there was air, stone, boxwood branches scraping my arm, and the clean snap of my wrist when I landed on the lower courtyard. I could not breathe. My ribs had taken the edge of the fountain. Time equals, quote, zero point 0.6 seconds, quote, slash greater than. Above me, people shouted, but it sounded like a dinner party in another house. Ethan climbed down the wall instead of using the stairs. I give him that. He knelt beside me and repeated, Do not move. Nora, do not move. Maya came down the stairs faster than the hotel manager. She put 2 fingers on my pulse, looked at my abdomen, and said in her calmest nurse voice, Talk to me. I said, Purse, zip pocket, heartbeat photo. She did not ask why. She found the ultrasound, held it where I could see it, and said, Still here. In the emergency department, the Doppler. Searched through static until the room found the galloping sound. 162s. Still there. My wrist was broken. My ribs were bruised. The ultrasound showed a small bleed near the placenta, a threat that made the doctor careful with his words. But the heartbeat kept running. That was the first truth the Ashfords could not kill. Hospitals have thin doors. That is why people who lie in hallways should choose better rooms. I was supposed to be sleeping when I heard Ethan speaking to someone outside my door. His voice was low, broken, and frightened. He said, She went over the wall. Then a pause. Then, I do not think Mom pushed her exactly. Maybe Nora backed up too far. Maybe she leaned. The word entered the room before he did and stood beside my bed like a second injury. Later, in the bathroom mirror, I lifted the hospital gown and saw the bruises on my shoulders. Time equals, quote, zero point 0.5 seconds, quote, slash greater than 2 uneven marks already darkening where Claire's hands had landed. I photographed them with my right hand because my left was casted from palm to forearm. Bad angle, shaky focus, date stamp on. Evidence does not need to be beautiful. It needs to exist. When Ethan returned, I asked who had called. He said, family. I said, your mother pushed me. He said it was confusing. Everyone was upset. We should wait before saying something that cannot be unsaid. There it was, the beginning of the erasure. He was not defending Claire yet. He was sanding the truth down so it would fit inside the family room. I asked the night nurse for my records. She knew exactly what I meant. By morning, I had copies of the triage notes, the fetal heart tracing, the X-ray report, and the discharge instructions that listed trauma from fall after physical contact. Time equals, quote, 0.6 seconds, quote, slash greater than I tucked them beside the ultrasound. The folder had begun before I even knew I was building it. 3 days after the hospital, the Ashfords came to my house without asking. I was home on bed rest with a cast, a pillow against my ribs, and Maya on speed dial. Ethan let them in because he still had a key. Claire did not come. She sent Simone, Daniel, and one of the family attorneys, a young man with expensive shoes and an expression that said he had never been in a nurse's living room before. Simone sat on my sofa and delivered the new story. Nora had been emotional. Nora had stepped back dramatically. Nora had made comments about money. Nora had always kept records, which they now treated like proof of planning instead of proof of professionalism. Daniel stared at his hands. Ethan stood by the bookshelf and said nothing. Then the attorney slid an envelope across my coffee table. $58,000 in exchange for a signed statement, a mutual release, and privacy. Privacy was the word they used when they meant silence. I looked at the number and almost laughed. They had turned my pregnancy into a scam, my fall into theater, and my pain into a settlement offer that cost less than Claire's birthday flowers. I said no. Simone's face changed then, and for a moment she looked exactly like her mother. You should take it, she said. Women like you do not get many chances to walk away clean. I pressed my cast against the edge of the envelope and slid it back. I'm clean already, I said. That is why you are all here, trying to make me sign something dirty. After they left, Maya arrived with soup, a legal pad, and the expression she wears when a resident tries to explain basic labor to her. She let me rage for 10 minutes. Then she drew a line down the page. On one side, she wrote story. On the other, she wrote record. Claire has the story, she said. She has money, reputation, and a family trained to repeat whatever keeps the trust comfortable. If you fight story with story, you become the hysterical pregnant woman they are already casting you to be. So we do record. We listed everything in order. Ultrasound at 9 weeks, fetal heart rate, hospital chart, fracture, images, bruise photos, hotel incident report, witness names, prenup, and whatever footage the Vesper Grand had. Cameras, Maya said. There were cameras near the bar and above the garden edge. Do not call the family. Do not post. Do not beg Ethan to remember. Let the hotel remember. Let the paper remember. I slept after that. Not long, but deeply. The next morning, I changed the logs with one working hand. It took almost an hour, and I cried once out of frustration because the screwdriver kept slipping. But when the bolt clicked, the house sounded different. Mine. I was not trying to punish anyone yet. I was trying to make sure my child was born in a home where the people who hurt me did not still have keys. The mistake came from Simone, because arrogance is sloppy even when it wears pearls. A week after the living room ambush, my phone lit up with a group thread I had never seen. Ashford Circle. 28 members. Simone had added me while trying to add another Nora from Claire's charity board, sent one message about a fundraiser, and removed me 4 minutes later. 4 minutes was enough. My phone had downloaded the history. I sat at the kitchen table with my cast on a towel and scrolled upward until the room seemed to lose oxygen. 10 days before the birthday dinner, Claire had written, "We handled the pregnancy. Announcement in public. If she is lying, she folds. If she is not, she learns who controls access to this family." Simone had replied, "I can see doubt before the toast." Ethan had written, "Mom, do not make this a scene." Claire answered, "Then tell your wife to bring proof." There were more. A cousin asking whether this was cruel. Claire writing, "Cruelty is letting another woman bleed us dry." Simone writing, "The baby changes distributions if it is real." There it was, not concern, math. My child was not a grandchild to them. Time equals quote, 0.6 seconds quote, slash greater than. She was a line item that reduced Simone's future. I did not screenshot and send it to the family. I backed it up in 3 places, printed it with timestamps, and called attorney Elise Rowan, a family law and personal injury lawyer Maya trusted. My first sentence to Elise was simple. "I have a thread they did not mean to send me." Her answer was even simpler. "Do not touch another button until I preserve it." Elise Rowan had a quiet office, grey walls, and the patience of someone who had watched rich families mistake volume for law. I gave her the hospital records, the ultrasound photos, the bruise images, the envelope with the hush money offer, the downloaded group thread, and the prenuptial agreement Claire's lawyer had once treated like a family shield. Elise read the prenup twice and smiled without warmth. "They wrote your best defense," she said. "This agreement says you cannot claim the trust in marriage, divorce, custody, or inheritance through Ethan. It even says children of the marriage have separate terms determined by the trustees and cannot create a spousal claim for you." Time equals quote, 0.6 seconds quote slash greater than. So their accusation that you fabricated a pregnancy to access the trust collapses under their own document. She explained the plan. First, subpoena the hotel footage and incident report. Second, file for divorce and emergency protective custody. Third, preserve the group thread for civil litigation and criminal review. Fourth, do not accept money, calls, or private meetings. I asked whether Claire could really be charged. Elise's face became completely still. "A shove that injures a pregnant woman is not a family misunderstanding." She said, "It is assault. If we prove planning, it is worse." I left her office with dates instead of panic. I had spent my career charting pain so other people could act on the truth. Now someone else was showing me how to chart my own. The Vesper Grand complied faster than anyone expected because hotels do not protect guests who create liability in high definition. The footage came with an incident report signed by the banquet manager and a server named Luis Mercado. Elise asked whether I wanted to watch. I said yes. I needed to see whether my body remembered accurately. The camera angle was cold and wide. There I was in a blue dress, back near the planter wall, one hand on my purse. Claire moved towards me. Ethan stood 6 feet away. Simone leaned forward as if she were watching a performance she helped rehearse. Time equals quote, 0.6 seconds quote, slash greater than Claire's hands came up. Both palms, both shoulders. Clean, hard. undeniable. My body went over the wall. Ethan did not move for 11 seconds. I know because I counted out loud. 11 seconds between his wife disappearing from the terrace and the moment he finally stepped forward. The report said guest Claire Ashford pushed guest Nora Bellamy over the garden wall following a verbal dispute regarding pregnancy announcement. Plain language. No drama, no adjective. Truth in uniform handwriting. Luis Mercado had written in one sentence what my own husband could not say in a week. Elise paused the video on Claire's hands against my shoulders and placed the prenup beside the screen. Here is the whole case, she said. Motive, plan, action, injury, and the document that disproves their defense. I looked at the paused frame and felt something I had not expected. Not triumph. Relief. The truth had finally moved outside my body, where they could not bruise it. Ethan came to my porch after the subpoena landed. He looked thinner, unshaven, like a man who had been sleeping inside a decision he hated. I did not let him inside. He sat on the top step and cried into his hands. "I love you," he said. "I love the baby. I know Mom went too far." Too far. 2 words for a broken wrist, a threatened placenta, and a family plot. I asked him one question. "Will you tell the truth under oath?" He looked at me, and I watched the boy inside the husband look toward his mother's house even though she was miles away. Claire's. Lawyer had given him a statement. It said the terrace was crowded, that I had stepped backward, that Claire had reached out to steady me, and that no one intentionally pushed anyone. He had signed it. I felt the lost thread of our marriage give way. Not violently, just cleanly. Ethan was not a monster. He was a purchased man, raised to believe that losing his mother's money meant losing oxygen. But understanding why someone abandons you does not turn abandonment into loyalty. I told him I would not raise a child with a man who needed permission to call violence by its name. He said, "Nora, please." I said, "I am done." Translating your fear into love. He left the porch without his jacket. I mailed it later through Elise's office because there were no more doors between us that opened directly. The one Ashford who called me without an agenda was Ethan's Aunt Lillian, Daniel's sister. She had been at the birthday dinner and had gone pale before the fall. Her voice trembled when she apologized. Then she told me what Claire had never told me. 32 years earlier, Claire's younger brother had married a Huitzilopochtli woman who lied about a pregnancy, or at least that was the family version. Money moved. Documents changed. The marriage collapsed. The brother lost his share, his house, and eventually himself to alcohol. Claire, then barely 30, rebuilt the family trust by force of will and fear. Time equals, quote, 0.6 seconds, quote, slash greater than, she turned one betrayal into a religion. No outsider would ever take from an Ashford again. Lillian said it softly, as if an explanation were a bandage. I sat with it after the call. It made Claire human, which was uncomfortable. I could see the terrified young woman under the silver hair, guarding money because she thought money was the last wall between her family and ruin. But wounds do not excuse weapons. The fact that someone once lied to Claire did not make my ultrasound fake. It did not make my daughter leverage. It did not give Claire the right to put her hands on my body and test the truth by force. I added Lillian's account to the file, not as evidence, but as understanding. Understanding can live beside accountability. One does not cancel the other. The settlement conference happened when I was 6 months pregnant and unmistakably so. I wore a navy dress, low shoes, and the smallest amount of makeup that made me feel like myself. Elise placed the folder in front of me and told me I might not need to say much. The documents would do the talking. Claire arrived in St. cream, flanked by 2 lawyers and a daughter who would not meet my eyes. Daniel followed. Ethan stood near the back wall. Not with me, not really with them, which was the most honest place he'd ever chosen. Claire began before her lead lawyer finished introductions. She said I had trapped her son. Time equals, quote, zero point 0.6 seconds, quote, slash greater than. She said I was using a child to pry open $12 million. She said women like me always found a weak man and a hard number. I felt the old heat rise, the desire to throw every word back at her. Then the baby moved under my ribs, and I remembered the Doppler. I did not shout. Time equals, quote, zero point 0.6 seconds, quote, slash greater than. Elise opened the folder. First, the 9-week ultrasound. Then the 20-week anatomy scan. A full little profile with a girl who already had her father's mouth and my stubborn chin. Then the hospital chart. Then the bruise photos. Then the hotel footage, played once in silence. Time equals, quote, zero point 0.6 seconds, quote, slash greater than. Then the incident report. Then the Ashford circle thread, highlighted where Claire had written, make her prove it in front of everyone. Finally, Elise placed the prenup on top. The document your family drafted, she said, proves Nora had no legal route to the trust. Your accusation is impossible under your own agreement. I looked at Claire and said the only sentence I had planned. You told me to prove it. I did. It is all here. Claire stared at the prenup as if it had betrayed her personally. For the first time since I had known her, she looked less like a queen and more like a woman standing in the ruins of a map she had drawn herself. Then she broke. Not quietly. She cried first, turning toward her lawyers, saying I had twisted everything, that I had manipulated the footage, the witnesses, her son, even my own medical chart. When the tears bought her nothing, the rage came. She stood so fast her chair hit the wall. I protected this family. She shouted. I built that trust. I know what women do. I know how they come smiling. With babies and leave with houses. Her lawyer said her name 3 times. Simone covered her face, not from compassion, but because the numbers were changing in her head. Daniel closed his eyes. Ethan began to cry, and I almost felt sorry for him until I remembered 11 seconds. Claire had wanted a room where she could control the story. Instead, she had given me a room where every lie had a matching exhibit. The criminal case would continue without her permission. The divorce would continue without Ethan's permission. The trust would begin reviewing Claire's role under its own morality clause, because a trustee charged with a violent felony against a pregnant woman was a risk no co-trustee could ignore. Elise slid the folder closed. The loudest person in the room had finally run out of useful noise. I stood slowly, one hand on the table, one hand on my belly, and walked out before anyone could ask me for mercy they had never shown me. Justice did not arrive like thunder. It arrived in certified mail, court dates, revised trust notices, and a guilty plea that Claire accepted only after the district attorney made clear the hotel footage would play in front of a jury. She avoided prison, but not a felony record. The charge was aggravated assault resulting in injury to a pregnant person. Time equals, quote, 0.6 seconds, quote, slash greater than. The plea placed her on probation, required restitution from her personal assets, and made her conviction permanent. The Ashford Trust removed her as trustee under the very clause she had once used to threaten everyone else. Conduct, bringing material risk to the trust. Simone stopped speaking to Claire, not because she had found a conscience, but because the scandal froze a distribution she had expected that spring. Daniel retreated into silence, the family language he knew best. Ethan signed the final divorce papers 2 weeks before my due date. In custody court, the judge looked at the video, the false statement, the felony plea, and the trust pressure around Ethan and gave me sole legal and physical custody. Ethan received supervised visitation only after completing counseling and signing an acknowledgement that the fall was not an accident. He delayed the signature for 6 months. That told me enough. The personal injury settlement paid medical bills, therapy, and a safety account for the baby. None of it came from the trust. I wanted that clear in every document. Claire had accused me of chasing their money. In the end, the only money I accepted was the cost of what she had broken. My daughter was born in April on a rainy morning, 7 pounds 4 ounces, furious from the first breath and perfect in the way only newborns can be perfect. Wrinkled, loud, and completely uninterested in anyone's drama. I named her Maeve because the name sounded like strength without shouting. Maya was in the room. Time equals quote, 0.6 seconds quote, slash greater than. She held one of my legs and bossed the resident like she had been waiting months to do it. When Maeve cried, I cried too, not prettily, not quietly, but with the kind of relief that comes from surviving a year 1 minute at a time. I kept both ultrasound photos in a frame on my dresser. The first grainy 9-week proof, smudged, from the Vesper courtyard, and the 20-week profile that answered every lie. The cast is gone now. My wrist aches when it rains, which feels almost poetic and mostly annoying. I went back to the labor floor part-time after maternity leave. I still chart carefully. I still write everything down. Time equals quote, 0.6 seconds quote, slash greater than Ethan sees Maeve under supervision at a family center with a social worker present. I hope one day he becomes a person who can tell the truth without asking what it costs. Hope is not access. Hope is not custody. Hope is not a key to my house. People ask whether I wanted revenge. The honest answer is yes, for about 10 seconds on that terrace. But revenge would have given them the version of me they needed. Unstable, greedy, dramatic, a nurse with a plan. The folder gave me something better. It gave me accuracy and sequence. That is what calm really was. Not forgiveness, not weakness, not a soft voice because I was unhurt. Calm was the discipline to let the evidence survive my feelings. Maeve will grow up knowing that her mother did not win because she married money, or shouted louder, or begged a coward to become brave. Her mother won because she kept the records and refused to let power rename violence as an accident. That is the inheritance I care about. Not $12 million. A house with a daughter sleeping safely inside. And a folder that taught me the truth does not need a crown. Time equals quote, 0.6 seconds quote, slash greater than, it needs a place to stand. That is my story. One terrace, one lie, one fall, one heartbeat, and one file that spoke louder than every person who tried to bury it. If someone in your life keeps turning harm into a misunderstanding, take this as your sign. Write it down. Keep the record. Time equals quote, 0.6 seconds quote, greater than protect the small life inside your care, even if that small life is only your own. Share this with someone who needs the courage to stay calm and keep proof. Drop a comment, hit subscribe, and I will see you in the next one.